tree and is a great with the ball in his hands after the catch. Now, Edelman is a tremendous slot receiver, has great short area quickness, has understanding to be able to read the defense, and has great chemistry with Tom Brady. I believe he's just as good as Troy Brown was, but people give credit for Troy Brown for being good. And I think Wes Welker and Edelman and some other guys, they don't get credit because they're white.
That was Hall of Fame wide receiver Cris Carter on Mike and Mike this morning. He certainly knows a thing or two about the position, essentially saying white receivers get no love. Stephen A., do you like that CC said this?
Well, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, I don't dislike it. Let me be very clear. I think to some degree he's right. I just think that, you know, a lot of times we have to analyze why that is. In the case of Jordy Nelson, I think it's inexcusable because as great as Aaron Rodgers is, Jordy Nelson being that deep threat that he was and being able to do the kind of things, you know, that he can do on a football field as a wide receiver, that can't go unnoticed. In the case of the Wes Welkers back in the day, the Julian Edelmans right now, the Danny Amendolas of the world, etc. You know, what you look at them as a byproduct of the system and the star quarterback. Again, even though there's Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, there was Jordy Nelson, not to poo-poo Randall Cobb, who can play well himself. But it was clearly Aaron Rodgers, Jordy Nelson. In the case of New England, it's Tom Brady, it's Rob Gronkowski. And I think Rob Gronkowski gets a lot of shine. But I also think that if we're being totally honest, a lot of times, you know, wide receivers are emblematic in terms of the lack of shine they may get, what CC was alluding to, Skip. It's emblematic of the world that we're living in and exactly what the NFL actually aspires and desires without even admitting it. And that is this. Everything is about the shield and those three letters. You put on your helmet, you put on your shoulder pads, your football equipment, and you go on about your merry way. And when you're celebrated, it's usually the team, with the exception of the handful of marquee athletes that the NFL deems marketable and wants marketable for their brand. What happens is that you have a lot of cats in the NFL, primarily at the wide receiver position, that do other things to bring attention to themselves, the celebrations in the end zones and things of that nature, to sort of like, look at me, look at me, look at me. The reason I don't judge it as negatively as some others may judge it is because since the NFL makes such a concerted effort to be about those letters and about that shield, that brand, at the expense of the individual, and it could potentially cost them money. And we all know their contracts aren't fully guaranteed over the years and years like NBA players. Anything that they can do without excessiveness to bring attention to themselves, as long as it's deserved, I'm not hating on it. That doesn't usually... that's not something that's usually required of the white receiver. And that is because if the white receiver is great and he wants shine, he's going to get it. Usually when they don't want it, they just don't want it. They don't want to bring attention to themselves. But if they want to bring attention to themselves and they're great at what they do, it will unquestionably come in their direction, more so than with some of these black players. And I think that's why that contributes to it to some degree.
Okay, so bottom line, I'm going to ask you this question. As a black man, do you find that you occasionally discount the ability of a white wide receiver because he's white?
No, I don't, because I see what I see.
Okay.
I see what I see. Now, Rob Gronkowski's great.
Yeah, but we're talking about a wide receiver where you have to. That's different with the tight ends because there are a lot of white tight ends.
Again, I don't discount them because of the color of their skin. I discount them because of their absence of ability compared to the black counterparts that they're going up against. If you ain't T.O., you ain't T.O. If you ain't Jerry Rice, you ain't Jerry Rice. In today's day, if you ain't Antonio Brown, if you ain't Des Bryant, if you ain't Julio Jones, I mean, I don't see color in that regard. No, I don't.
Okay. I think I have been guilty on occasion of discounting the white wide receiver just because the numbers don't lie. I think we're all conditioned a little bit just by the statistics to say, well, gee, there just aren't very many of them. I'm going to point out to you the last white wide receiver, not tight end, but split receiver to go into the Hall of Fame was Steve Largent in 1995. That's 20 years ago.
Right.
And just to refresh some of our younger viewers' memories, if you keep going back to Hall of Fame inductees, you got Fred Biletnikoff, you remember from the Raiders, that's all the way back to 88. Don Maynard was a Joe Namath receiver, but he didn't get in until 87. Lance Allworth, Raymond Berry, you can keep going back to Crazy Legs Hirsch,
Yes.
but there aren't that many of these. And then if we look at the Pro Bowl, Jordy Nelson made a Pro Bowl last year with Aaron Rodgers. Then we go back 2 years to Wes Welker, who made 5 for Tom Brady.
Right.
To me, I always viewed Wes Welker as more of a Brady product, than Julian Edelman. Edelman's a freak to me, and I've told you this on the show many times. He is legit. He's not just a slot receiver. That's the only place where I disagree with Chris. You can split Edelman out. He can run 4.5 in the 40. He can get behind people.
Got it.
He has rare quickness and reasonable NFL wide receiver speed, like a pretty good wide receiver. 4.5 is no laughing matter, okay? So to me, he's not a Brady product nearly as much as Welker, who ran a 4.7 40 when he was coming in, okay? Undrafted. Okay, Edelman, again, a college quarterback drafted in the 7th round.
Got it.
But now back to Jordy Nelson. I've made the point to you several times on the show. I think we're missing the boat here. Jordy Nelson is a freak athlete to me. He's 6'3", 217, and he runs 4.5.
That's right.
I think he helped, I'm not going to say he made Aaron Rodgers, but I think he was a big component that Aaron Rodgers is missing more than some people are giving it credit for. And I've said to you, sort of half-kiddingly, are you sure it wasn't Jordy helping make Aaron Rodgers than vice versa? Because I do think Aaron Rodgers came to rely upon the deep speed that Jordy Nelson has. He's got a gear of speed that makes him, with the football in his hands or running under a football, he looks like he runs 4.4 when he's on the football field in pads to me. So again, there haven't been very many. There aren't very many wide receivers right now. They're mostly slots, like Cole Beasley. Amendola, of course, is going to replace Edelman. But Eric Decker and Jordy Nelson are stud white wide receivers who are stud athletes. You remember, Eric Decker's 6'3", 214 and runs 4.5.
I think Eric Decker is good. I don't consider him a stud.
No, he's not.
I don't consider him a stud.
But he is very athletic.
I consider Jordy Nelson a stud. And like you said, the simple numbers, say it all. Because, again, why are you noticing something that's not there? If they're not playing at that position, and most of the people who play the position happens to be black, well, that's why the black players would get to shine and the white players would not. It's not like there's a bunch of all-pro wide receivers who happen to be white in the NFL and they're flying under the radar and nobody notices them. They're not there. And I think that's the different equation. When Cris Carter says what he says, then it implies, to some degree anyway, that they're there, but we're not noticing them.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is they're not there. If they're there, we're noticing them.
That's
fair.
fair.
Don't care what color you are. If Jordy Nelson can ball, you're going to notice that. I do think that a lot of the black players, not a lot of them, but the few, bring attention to themselves in a different way.
Okay.
Antonio Brown with his flips. He's great. He's a great player, but you also know, and the dancing and all of that stuff, it is what it is.
Hey, when he did the complete somersault flip, but to me, I'm like, wow.
But he doesn't even need to do that.
He doesn't need that because I don't want him to twist the ankle, hurt an Achilles. He wants his money. He deserves his money. I want to make sure he gets his money. That's my position. Des Bryant with the X sign or whatever the case may be. Julio Jones doesn't have to do much. Des Bryant doesn't even have to do much. But that X does add to Dez's appeal.
It does.
There's no doubt about that. You got guys who happen to be white men who may not elect to go that route.
Except for one.
Who?
Julian Edelman.
Well, no question.
Biggest trash talker in pro football. He's in every DB's face after every little catch. He'll catch a 3-yarder.
Should have seen him at the Patriots parade.
But the flip side to it, y'all, I did not see that. But the flip side to it, guys, is this. We talk ad nauseum and rave ad nauseum about the greatness of Tom Brady to the point where we say the Bill Belichick success era is all about Tom Brady. Tom Brady made Bill Belichick because Bill Belichick wasn't this or wasn't that until Tom Brady arrived. Well, we can't sit there and say that about Tom Brady with Bill Belichick, but don't say that about Julian Edelman. So it's in the case of a Julian Edelman, one could argue that Tom Brady contributes to the lack of respect that he gets unintentionally, of course, because Tom Brady is just so phenomenal at what he does that you gloss over. It's just like I was watching NFL films and they would, rehashing the Super Bowl last night on the NFL Network and what have you, and you had the offensive line coach talking about, even when they were down 10. He said, were we concerned? No, we weren't. Because we got Tom Brady, the ninja. You can do anything. You see, so when you have that kind of mentality, it does not matter who you put out there because he's so great. Even though Aaron Rodgers is so great, Jordy Nelson is such a freak that you can't disguise or hide what he does. But what Jordy Nelson Usually, what Jordy Nelson possesses is usually something that's possessed by a lot of black players, which is why you see the vast majority of them at that position over the last 20 years.
Okay, so has Jordy Nelson done himself a disservice by not being more vocal, more outspoken, more audacious on the field?
Well, that depends on what he wants. If he wants more shine, then he has done himself a disservice. If he wants to fly under the radar
marketing
and doesn't want that attention, then he hasn't. But let's also keep in mind that we don't need to use this as an excuse to, and I'm not saying we're doing it, but we don't need to use it as an excuse to denigrate players out there who do bring attention to themselves. Because you got to remember that this is not the NBA. You're not walking around and you're recognizable.
That's true.
Okay, you're putting on helmets and football equipment.
I agree.
And your identity is disguised to some degree.
Different
if you don't
than
step
NBA.
out, if you don't step out there, you know, then guess what? Nobody knows who you are. You know, me doing NFL Countdown on Sunday mornings. It's NFL players that roll up in their halftime. I don't know who the hell they are until they tell me. You know, ain't an NBA player that can walk in there that I won't know because I see them. You don't always see those football players.
And there's less of them, too.
So they feel compelled to market themselves because they know they're working in a league that doesn't market them.
And the final thing about any wide receiver, the diva receivers as we call them, they can't demand the football. It has to be thrown to them. It's rare sometimes that they even get a ball thrown in their direction if they're double covered. So it drives them crazy. So when they do make a big catch,
it's a big
they want the world to know about it.
But in all that
That's
work,
a really good
in the
point.
offseason, all that work, and you're playing in front of empty, from the empty stands, and then all of a sudden you get in front of tens of thousands of people and you perform, you are going to be hyped about that.
Especially when you have no control from that standpoint.
No control.